This morning's scripture reading is from Proverbs chapter 24, verses 3 through 7, and 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 21b through 33. The first scripture reading is from Proverbs 24, 3 through 7. By wisdom a house is built, and by understanding it is established. By knowledge the rooms are filled with all precious and pleasant riches. Wise warriors are mightier than strong ones, and those who have acknowledged than those who have strength. For by wise guidance you can wage your war, and in abundance of counselors there is a victory. Wisdom is too high for fools. In the gate they do not open their mouths. These are the words of God. Thanks be to God. Second reading from 2 Corinthians 11, 21 through 33. To my shame, I must say, we were too weak for that. But whatever anyone dares to boast of, I am speaking as a fool. I also dare to boast of that. As are they Hebrews? So am I. Are they Israelites? So am I. Are they descendant of Abraham? So am I. Are they ministers of Christ? I am talking like a madman. I am a better one with far greater labor, far more imprisonments, with countless floggings, and often near death. 5 times I have received from the Jews the 40 lashes minus 1. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I adrift at sea. On frequent journeys, in dangers from rivers, danger from bandits, danger from my own people, danger from Gentiles, danger in the city, danger in the wilderness, danger at sea, danger from false brothers and sisters, in toil, food, and hardship, through many a sleepless night, hungry and thirsty, often without food, cold and naked. And besides other things, I am under daily pressure because of my anxiety for all the churches. Who is weak and I am not weak? Who is made to stumble and I am not indignant? If I must boast, I will boast of these things that show my weakness. The God and Father of the Lord Jesus Christ, blessed be he forever, knows that. Do not lie. I do not lie. In Damascus, the governor under King Aretas guarded the city of Damascus in order to seize me, but I am let down in a basket through a window in the wall and escape from his hands. These are the words of God, and thanks be God. Today's message is our own pastor, Dr. Don Smith. The title is Ministering to Those in Danger.
Who would have ministered to Paul? Because Paul certainly did know what it was like to meet danger. Some weeks ago, I told you that this year in my preaching, I'm going to sort of include the theme. Oh, that's right. Excuse me. Thank you. A few weeks ago, I told you that I would be including in my preaching this year themes that are in the denominational calendar. because I think it's well for us to become acquainted with those things that our Presbyterian Church are doing, areas in which they are working for us and for the world and the gospel of Jesus Christ. This particular Sunday, it has to do with federal chaplaincies. And there is an association of Presbyterian federal chaplains. And I thought it would be good to sort of preach on that theme, except that that's not an area in which I work. I've never counseled military warriors on the battlefield. I've never been a chaplain for a police force or for firemen or other, first responders and so on. And so I looked up on the internet something about this association of federal chaplains. And wrote a friend of mine who I haven't seen for years, but she followed me at a church in Garden Grove. And while she was there pastoring, she was also the chaplain for the local police force. So I tried to contact her to hear from her experience before I preached the sermon this morning. Well, when I came into the office, I had an email from her, and we could have talked on the phone, but I didn't see her email until this morning. But she did share a particular experience that she had had while she was there. So I thought I'd read through some of the things that we know and the Presbyterians say about being a chaplain in a federal setting. For example, how do I become a military chaplain? I think this is interesting. First, you must be an ordained minister or be accepted to a seminary for a Master of Divinity degree and working with your presbytery on becoming an ordained minister. Second, you must complete the appropriate application and the approval endorsement process with the Presbyterian Federal Chaplaincy. Applicants for military service, you must work with a chaplain recruiter to complete the military side of the application process. Applicants for the Veterans Administration, you will find more information at this website, and there's a link that you can go to. Anyone who believes God may be calling him or her to this work, the Presbyterian Federal Chaplaincy is here to help you through the process of discerning your call. Then on the other side, I'll read you how it describes what these chaplains do and why the Presbyterian Church provides chaplains for these services. The primary purpose of military and VA chaplains is to protect the constitutional guarantee of, quote, the free exercise of religion, unquote, for the men and women who serve in our armed forces. Every chaplain comes from a particular faith group and is responsible for meeting the religious needs of those who adhere to that faith. However, chaplains are also responsible for ensuring that members of other faith groups are equally well served, and that the rights of those who have no religious faith are protected. Finally, chaplains provide care to all military personnel as well as their family members and play a critical role in advising commanders on how best to address the moral, spiritual, and ethical issues that confront our people every day. And I was struck by that because it's my understanding that when you become a chaplain in the armed forces, you begin at the rank of captain. And I think that's why in the military, rank is very important. And if you're going to consult commanders about the best ways to serve the ethical, moral, etc., issues of the people under their command, you have to have a rank that gives you the right to talk to them in that way. Military chaplains. First, a chaplain is a person of faith who demonstrates care and concern for the welfare of others. Second, Presbyterian ministers must possess an MDiv degree and be in good standing with their presbyteries. Third, this is particularly interesting to me. Physical fitness is mandatory. A chaplain must be able to keep up with 19 to 25-year-olds.
Dear.
Run from 1.5 to 4 miles on a regular basis. Do sit-ups, push-ups, and maintain weight standards for that particular service. Fourth, personal and professional relationships must be above reproach. And finally, education and training must be a consistent and ongoing discipline. Chaplains are expected to constantly improve their knowledge and understanding both of the military and the faith communities from which they come. I also ran across this. Now, I happen to have a stamp collection. And one of the stamps that I have is a commemorative stamp from 1943 or 4 of 4 chaplains. And let me read to you some of the information about those 4 chaplains and why there's a commemorative stamp for them. The Dorchester chaplains were 4 World War II chaplains who died rescuing civilian and military personnel as on the American troop ship SS Dorchester sank on February 3rd, 1943. The Dorchester was a civilian liner converted for military service in World War II as a war shipping administration troop transport. She was able to carry slightly more than 900 military passengers and crews. The ship left New York on January 23, 1943, en route to Greenland, carrying approximately 900 others as part of a convoy of 3 ships escorted by Coast Guard cutters. During the early morning hours of February 3rd, the vessel was torpedoed by a German submarine off Newfoundland in the North Atlantic. The chaplains helped the other soldiers board lifeboats and gave up their own life jackets when the supply ran out. The chaplains joined arms, said prayers, and sang hymns as they went down with the ship. In 1998, February 3rd of that year, was established by Senate Resolution 169-98 as 4 Chaplains Day to commemorate the 55th anniversary of the sinking of that ship and the subsequent heroism of these men. Some state or city officials commemorate the day with official proclamations, sometimes including the order that flags fly at half-mast in memory of the fallen chaplains. And there's also a chapel of the 4 chaplains dedicated February 3rd, 1951 by President Harry S. Truman. It's in the basement of a Baptist church, but it holds memorabilia of that particular event. Now, when I came in this morning, none of this really has to do with how you minister to people who face danger, except that these men saw to it that they got on boats and were safe. But Cheryl Raines, the minister I contacted yesterday, did send me this paragraph from her work with the police force in Garden Grove. My ministry to them was one of presence. Like any other chaplain role, I did a lot of listening and often followed in with officers if they had a traumatic call. I remember being able to meet with an officer who pulled over a woman who was rushing her child to the hospital. The child died, and that obviously troubled the officer. I was able to officiate at the child's memorial and spent time with the family, which allowed me to follow up with the officers and tell him the story of that young child. It was really helpful. Often officers don't know the end of the story, so to speak, which leaves their emotions raw. So this is sort of a glimpse into chaplaincy in the military sense, and with people who sort of live out their service facing danger on a regular basis. I've told you about the woman who banged on our kitchen door or kitchen window at 11 o'clock at night and asked me to go with her to go back home to her husband because her husband was out waiting to shoot her. He'd found a note in a book that was in their cabin, and he thought the note was written by a lover to her, and it wasn't. But when she told me that she wanted me to go back with her, the first thing in my mind was that he would suspect that I was the lover. And if he had a gun, he might try to shoot me. But I took her anyway, because it was important that she feel safe. When we parked in front of the cabin, there was a long stairway up to the front door. And so while she climbed the stairway, I got on the other side of the car. So the car was between me and whatever would be in the cabin. And she opened the door and went in. And a few seconds later came back and said, "You can come in." So when I went in, the fellow was sitting at a little kitchen table, and he was telling me how sorry he felt, that he just was miserable because of what he'd done. And his wife was in the bedroom collecting her things. And I said to him, if I were you, I wouldn't be sitting here with me. I'd be in the bedroom talking to my wife. And he got up and went in. And I didn't hear any shouting, wasn't any yelling, no conflict that I could hear. And she came out in a little bit and she said, "It's okay, you can leave now." And so I went home, and the building where we had our sanctuary and the apartment that the minister lived in was up on a top of a hill that overlooked the cabin area where I had just been. And I was standing at the kitchen sink washing dishes, and I saw their car. I recognized their car with a little trailer behind, packed, leaving. And I knew that they were on their way back to where they'd come from because they had family and friends there. And I knew that they had a chance of having a new life together. And it happened one other time. I've told you about the woman whose husband was dead drunk in the living room, and she was just filled with all this anger and frustration. And the words that came out of my mouth were God's words. They weren't mine, because I was thinking something altogether different. And she sort of unloaded everything. And in a few weeks, her family and she also went back to where they'd come from, so that they could heal as a family. I wrote a website, prepared a website for my D-men. And it's about churches that face external criticism from groups that want them to change their theology, their way of looking at the world, and so on. And so in that website, I mentioned 3 ways of helping a church deal with that. The first one is to cool the temperature. When you're under attack, you get excited and you get nervous and you get angry and upset. And when I was in Lincoln, Nebraska, we had pickets who were coming most Sundays because we had a man on our session who was a physician who performed abortions, one of 2 doctors in all of the state of Nebraska who would perform an abortion. And he felt it was a woman's right to have a choice. And so he did it out of principle. Well, the church was under attack because of him. Church of 2,000 or more people, I mean, a lot of people. And there were a lot of people in the congregation who agreed with the pickets, but they were embarrassed by the way they were going about protesting. That's the first one, just to cool the temperature, get people to think and relax and be at peace. The second suggestion I made was to know the source. Identify where the protest is coming from. Identify the reason for it. so that you have a clear understanding of why people are doing what they're doing and why they're saying what they're saying. Because it's important that you understand that and can then respond to it meaningfully. And the third suggestion that I made was to reframe the situation. And at this church, one of the ways I reframed what the experience they were going through was to share with them that because they were under attack, they were experiencing what the disciples who walked with Jesus experienced. That to be a disciple of Jesus meant that the anger and the frustration and the danger that you faced because you were sort of standing against what was popular in that particular society, you had to go through that experience in order to understand the difference between righteousness and unrighteousness. And so when churches experience this kind of resistance, in a sense, it tells them they're on the right track. I know I've had people after me through the years, and I've always been impressed with the fact that they were people whose attitude and life principles, I'm glad saw that I was not friendly to them. I mean, in the sense that I didn't stand for what they stood for. And I was glad to see them pushing against me. When you face danger, it's easy to just say, well, I'm not going to do it. I don't want to take the risk. I don't want to take the chance. But if you do that, you can't follow Jesus. Because Jesus always leads us into uncomfortable situations where, Jesus resisted the evil of his time. He resisted the things that drew people apart and brought sickness and hurt and pain into their lives. And when he did it, he was criticized. He did things on the Sabbath that he was not supposed to do. The man in John's gospel that he gave sight back to, the religious leaders didn't like that because obviously he was blind because there was some sin in his family or in him. And Jesus was sort of taking the punishment of the sin away. Well, Jesus took away a lot of punishment in the life of the Jews at that time. The woman who was going to be stoned because she'd been caught in adultery. He said, well, if you're without sin, throw the first stone. And no one would. When you walk with Jesus, when you face danger that comes from a legitimate job that you're doing. I was thinking if I were a chaplain to the military, one of the things that I would want to get across is that a soldier is there to perform a particular duty. And it's an uncomfortable duty. It's a duty that really goes against everything we're taught as we're growing up. But our government sends us there to do that job. And I would say that we all need to remember that Jesus said, peace I leave with you. My peace I give you, not as the world gives do I give. Let not your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid. That when we are called to a task, whether we carry it out or whether out of conscience we don't, God provides what we need. And if for some reason we die on the battlefield, or we lose our job, or something happens to us because we were faithful to what we knew God wanted from us, God promises life after life. Even if we lose our lives, we have not lost because God has provided for us. And so I would want everyone, including everyone sitting here, including myself, to remember that when we face risk and danger, we don't need to be afraid. because we have been assured by God Himself that we can have peace and relax and put ourselves in the hands of God without fear.